Chapter 1. First Contact. The Galactic Council Hall was a swirling hive of alien voices, a symphony of clicks, hums, and guttural whispers. For Captain Alara Cade, Earth's first official envoy to the galactic community, it was overwhelming but electrifying. As she stepped into the towering chamber, she straightened her posture, doing her best to look calm despite the relentless eyes observing her every move. From her peripheral vision, she caught glimpses of creatures she'd only seen in mission briefings. Aliens with glistening exoskeletons, feathered heads, and bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like living tattoos. Most of them exchanged hushed words or dismissive glances as she passed, a look of mild amusement or condescension flickering in their strange, unfamiliar eyes. Alara tightened her grip on the edge of the slim data tablet in her hand. She knew this mission would be difficult. Humanity had come a long way, struggling to reach the point of being acknowledged, even invited to this galactic summit. But she hadn't expected this reception to feel quite so cold. She scanned the room, looking for any sign of Ambassador Threll, the Avrani representative who had summoned her team. Threll was one of the senior figures in the council, known for his stern diplomacy and a reputation for strict adherence to protocol. When he finally appeared, gliding down the polished silver walkway toward her, his expression was unreadable, a mask of polished calm, with dark, unblinking eyes. "So, you're the human representative," he said, his voice layered with a tone that almost sounded impressed. "Captain Alara Cade, I presume?" Alara nodded, her voice firm but respectful. "Yes, Ambassador Threll. I'm here to represent Earth and humanity. Thank you for inviting us." "Invite might be too generous a word," Threll replied with a faint smirk. His head tilted as he observed her, his scaled skin shimmering under the council's fluorescent lights. "I'm curious, Captain. Do you humans even understand what it means to be part of this council?" Alara held his gaze, her heart pounding as she replied, "We know enough to be here. We know that we can bring something valuable to the galaxy. Humanity has learned resilience, adaptation. Threll interrupted, his tone laced with amusement. "And what could humans possibly adapt to that we haven't already mastered?" At that moment, Dr. Merrick Vaughn, her scientific advisor, leaned forward, his voice low but unrestrained. "With respect, Ambassador, we've survived our own extinction threats, environmental catastrophes, pandemics, conflicts. Our adaptability is what brought us to the stars, in case you hadn't noticed." Threll's lips quirked upward as he studied Merrick, but there was no warmth in his smile. "Yes, Doctor, we did notice, though it was hard to miss the modest nature of your arrival craft." He gestured towards the viewport, where Earth's shuttle sat, a utilitarian vessel dwarfed by the sleek alien ships stationed nearby. A ripple of laughter and whispers passed through the crowd, leaving Alara feeling a mixture of irritation and determination. She drew a breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "We may not have the resources that some other species have," she said, her tone unwavering, "but we have something just as valuable: the will to survive and the determination to learn." Threll's expression hardened. "You're quite bold, Captain, but being part of this council is not a mere invitation. It requires proving one's worth. Perhaps a test would reveal if your resilience holds under real pressure." Alara met his stare without flinching. "We're ready for any test you propose, Ambassador." A few murmurs arose from the council members around her. Threll's eyes glimmered with something close to intrigue. "Very well, Captain. Consider this your initiation. We have a simulated tactical exercise reserved for species applying for council membership. Let's see if your adaptability lives up to the legend you've created." Alara's jaw tightened as she exchanged a glance with Merrick. His expression was serious but determined. This test would either establish humanity's worth or cement the council's doubts. Within moments, the chamber shifted as a set of holographic screens blinked into existence around them. The alien council members arranged themselves in an arc, creating a tribunal-like setting with Threll at its center. Alara noticed the faint hum of hidden projectors activating, as holographic representations of their opponents' ships appeared in vivid detail. "Captain Cade," Threll announced, his voice projecting to the entire room, This is a standard battle simulation we conduct to assess the strategic and tactical capabilities of new members. You must command a team to overcome a series of hostile incursions and secure a vulnerable outpost. Your task: defend the outpost, minimize casualties, and outmaneuver your opponents. Alara nodded, her fingers instinctively tightening around her tablet. She quickly scanned the simulated layout, noting the unfamiliar symbols and readouts. Merrick leaned in, whispering urgently, "These symbols. Some of these ships have cloaking tech, and others seem to have advanced shielding. It's highly irregular for a test." Alara's eyes narrowed, her suspicion mounting. Threll wasn't simply testing them. He was stacking the odds. She turned to Merrick, her voice low. "We'll treat this as more than a test. This is our first chance to show them who we are. Adaptability, right?" He nodded, grinning slightly. "Right?" The simulation began. Alara took a breath, steadying herself as she commanded her simulated fleet, making swift decisions to position their units defensively. The alien ships materialized, cloaking devices flickering before they unleashed a barrage of energy. The room watched in silence, the council members leaning in with interest, some murmuring among themselves. Through deft maneuvers, Alara directed her team with precision, dodging attacks and finding openings. Merrick's rapid assessments and strategic inputs became invaluable as they adapted to the unfamiliar technology and tactics. As the battle raged on, she could feel the initial dismissive energy in the room transform, replaced by quiet, begrudging respect. Finally, with a decisive countermove, Alara's team overpowered the last enemy unit. The holograms dissipated, and silence filled the room as her team's victory registered. She stood tall, meeting Threll's scrutinizing gaze. Threll's expression was unreadable, his voice a quiet acknowledgement. "Impressive, Captain Cade. Perhaps humanity has more potential than we anticipated." His tone, though measured, carried the faintest hint of respect. Alara couldn't help but allow a faint smile. They'd passed the first test, but she knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. The Test. The council simulation chamber was silent, a vast, gleaming arena of polished silver and crystalline blue light. Captain Alara Cade stood beside her team, the tension palpable as Ambassador Threll reviewed their performance from the previous test. She could feel the skeptical eyes of the council members following her every move, their silent judgment heavier than any spoken critique. "Quite a showing," Threll finally said, his voice a calculated mixture of condescension and intrigue. "But a single victory in a simulation means little here. We require proof that your species is adaptable in more ways than one." Alara straightened, meeting Threll's gaze without flinching. "We came here to represent humanity's strengths," she replied calmly. "If there's more you wish to assess, we're ready." Threll raised a brow, clearly bemused by her steady resolve. "Very well, Captain. Prepare for a second test, a more complex one." He motioned to a nearby technician, who adjusted a panel, filling the chamber with a low hum as the room dimmed. With a flicker, a new hologram projected above them, a simulated starship bridge surrounded by a star field, distant nebulas swirling beyond the glass. But this time, the scenario was different. Alara's team would be navigating an emergency situation on a foreign vessel, a vessel on the verge of catastrophic failure. Alien systems, foreign symbols, and untested technologies were all waiting to confound them. And, as Threll soon made clear, they had only minutes to prevent disaster. "Your objective is simple," Threll intoned. "Prevent the ship from exploding. Failure to do so, well, the consequences should be obvious." Alara glanced at Dr. Merrick Vaughn, her scientist and technical advisor, who nodded in grim understanding. Together, they stepped into the projection, the hologram enveloping them in an eerie, immersive clarity. The air felt denser here, humming with the simulated urgency of the crisis they were about to face. Immediately, alarms wailed around them, and red warning lights bathed the room in a menacing glow. Alara squinted at the alien control panels, trying to make sense of the complex symbols flashing in rapid succession. The alien bridge was a tangle of controls. Panels embedded with multi-layered touch interfaces and controls that seemed to shift depending on the user's gestures. "Captain, these systems are entirely alien," Merrick muttered as he scanned the controls. "None of this matches what we've studied in training. This is intentional. They're trying to overwhelm us. They underestimate our ability to adapt," Alara replied, determination hardening her gaze. She knew that hesitation would be their enemy. "We've faced unknowns before, Merrick. Let's break it down and work fast." She quickly assigned roles, dividing the team to assess different control stations. Merrick took charge of deciphering the engine room systems, while another officer, Ensign Reza, analyzed the life support systems. Merrick leaned over his console, rapidly sorting through the hieroglyph-like symbols. "It's a containment breach in the reactor core," he announced, his voice taut. "We have about 4 minutes to stabilize the coolant systems, or we'll lose the ship." Alara's fingers flew over her console, feeling the unfamiliar, shifting panels as if they were instinctive. She guided Merrick, watching him troubleshoot the control patterns as if they were puzzles instead of instructions written in an alien language. He muttered to himself, testing sequences and bypassing warning prompts with remarkable speed. Just as Merrick managed to stabilize the core, Ensign Reza called out, "Captain, life support is failing. Oxygen levels are dropping across all decks. If we don't fix it, we'll be unconscious in less than 3 minutes." Alara took a steadying breath, her mind racing. "Reza, reroute secondary power from non-essential systems to the life support. Prioritize oxygen on the bridge and core levels." Reza worked swiftly, fingers flashing over the controls as he followed her command. There was a tense silence as they waited for the system to respond. Then, with a faint hum, the life support indicators flickered back to green. Alara let out a brief sigh of relief, but kept her focus razor-sharp. "All right, Merrick, what's next?" Merrick's eyes scanned the reactor's readouts. "Captain, there's another layer, temperature controls. They're still in flux. If it goes critical again, all our work so far will be pointless." A faint smile tugged at Alara's lips, despite the tension. "Then let's make sure that doesn't happen." She moved to his side, her fingers deftly manipulating the temperature controls alongside him. The seconds ticked down as the team worked, their movements synchronized by a shared urgency that cut through the alien unfamiliarity. The council members watched in silence from the observation balcony, the skepticism in their expressions replaced by reluctant respect. With only seconds to spare, Merrick input the last sequence, stabilizing the temperature controls with a final keystroke. The alarm stopped abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Alara exhaled, turning to face Threll and the assembled council. She didn't allow herself a smile yet, though her heart surged with the triumph of having overcome yet another of their so-called tests. Threll's gaze lingered on her, his mask of composure slipping just slightly to reveal a flicker of genuine surprise. "I must admit, Captain, I hadn't expected your team to succeed so efficiently." "We've learned to handle the unknown," Alara replied, a hint of steel in her voice. "Adaptability is in our nature, Ambassador." Threll's lips pressed into a thin line. "Perhaps, but adaptability alone does not guarantee acceptance. A final challenge remains, a task where diplomacy and strategy must work hand in hand. You'll be dealing with a rogue faction." Alara tensed. "A rogue faction?" She glanced at Merrick, whose face reflected her own unease. They had trained for technical challenges for simulations, but diplomacy with a rogue faction, especially one unknown to them, was far riskier. "This group," Threll continued, "is known for its unpredictability. They've taken hostages on a nearby outpost. Your task is to negotiate with them, or force their hand if needed. Humanity's place here will hinge on your success." As he spoke, Alara felt a chill run down her spine. She understood this wasn't merely a final test. This was a direct challenge to their worthiness, to the humanity she represented. "We'll do what's necessary," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. She could sense her team's silent support at her back, their confidence stealing her resolve. Threll's expression softened, just slightly, as he nodded, as if recognizing something of himself in her courage. "Then let us see if humanity truly deserves its place in the galaxy," he said, gesturing toward the council chamber doors. Alara squared her shoulders, taking a steadying breath as she led her team out, their footsteps echoing through the silent chamber. They were on the edge of proving themselves, but the hardest part was yet to come. Chapter 3: The Bargain. The shuttle hummed as it descended toward the rogue outpost surface, the thrusters guiding them toward the harsh, desolate landscape below. Captain Alara Cade sat at the front, eyes trained on the dusty view, her expression resolute but calm. This mission was as much a gamble as it was a test of their diplomatic mettle, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. She glanced at her crew, all strapped into their seats, equally tense but ready. Approaching the landing site, Ensign Reza said, adjusting the controls with a steady hand. His eyes, usually bright with curiosity, were now focused with a precision Alara appreciated. Alara nodded and looked over her shoulder at Dr. Merrick Vaughn, who had been running through a tactical briefing, his datapad filled with notes on their potential opponents. "Anything else we need to know about this faction, Merrick?" she asked. Merrick tapped the pad thoughtfully. "From what we gathered, they're primarily a mining syndicate turned rogue. They've been known to extort supplies from remote colonies under the guise of protection fees. Not much discipline, but their leader, Gresh, is ambitious. He's known for playing both diplomat and warlord, depending on what benefits him most. Sounds like we'll need to keep our wits about us," Alara said, adjusting her own weapon's holster, hoping they wouldn't need to use it. She had learned from past missions that the best strategy was to be prepared for both negotiation and combat. As they disembarked, a group of Gresh's soldiers awaited them on the platform, weapons slung over their shoulders in a display of casual authority. The men were outfitted in rugged armor pieced together from a mix of Federation and alien tech, each one's gaze flickering with suspicion as they eyed the newcomers. "Captain Cade," said one of the soldiers, stepping forward with a stiff nod. "The boss is expecting you. Follow us." The path to Gresh's headquarters wound through a narrow canyon of jagged red rocks that seemed to lean inward, casting elongated shadows over them. Alara kept her gaze forward, but noted her team's silent vigilance. Their senses were as sharp as the blade-like edges of the cliffs around them. The rogue camp itself was a cluster of mismatched buildings, patched together from rusted metal and makeshift scaffolding. It was a place built for survival, not comfort. Inside the central building, Gresh awaited them in a makeshift throne room. He was tall and lean, his face marked by both scars and arrogance. Beside him stood a console where he adjusted communication channels with a flick of his fingers, sending signals to ships orbiting above. His eyes met Alara's, narrowing with a mixture of interest and caution. "Ah, Captain Cade," he said with a smirk, waving her forward. "I've heard a lot about humanity's persistence. Seems you're here to prove yourselves worthy of our respect." Alara met his gaze steadily. "We're here to resolve a hostage situation. Release the civilians, and there's no need for this to escalate." Gresh chuckled, the sound deep and mocking. "Oh, I admire your straightforwardness, but it's not that simple. Those hostages are our leverage. Without them, the Federation wouldn't have given us a second glance." Alara took a step closer, her voice calm but firm. "And what exactly do you want, Gresh? If it's negotiations with the Federation, we can facilitate that. But harming innocent civilians won't get you respect. It'll get you enemies." Gresh's expression flickered for a moment, as if calculating her words, before he leaned back and laughed. "Bold words. But how do I know you have any sway with the Federation?" Merrick stepped forward, his voice level. "We were sent by the Council to prove humanity's adaptability, Gresh. Successfully mediating a peaceful resolution with you would strengthen that cause." Gresh's gaze shifted to Merrick, intrigued. "So you're not here just for the hostages, then? This is your test." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with sudden interest. "Interesting. And if I choose not to cooperate, then you'd be underestimating humanity's persistence," Alara replied coolly, her eyes locked on his. "We're prepared for whatever path you choose." A silence fell over the room as Gresh considered this, his eyes scanning her face, searching for any hint of hesitation. He found none. You're a risk-taker, Captain, he said finally, amusement in his voice. Fine. I'll let the hostages go, but on one condition. He motioned to a screen, which displayed a map of a nearby sector. We have rivals, a Federation convoy scheduled to deliver supplies to an outpost nearby. You escort that convoy to us, unharmed, and I'll release the hostages. Alara clenched her fists but kept her expression neutral. She had known a demand would come, but aiding in what was essentially a heist would paint a target on her and her team. And yet, any refusal might mean the hostages' lives were forfeit. Merrick leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. Captain, we need to tread carefully here. If we refuse outright, we risk escalation. But if we agree, the Council might question our motives. Alara's mind raced, searching for a way to turn the situation in their favor. Gresh was no fool, and backing him into a corner would only push him to retaliate. She looked back at Gresh, her voice measured. We'll ensure the convoy arrives safely, Gresh, but we'll do it our way. No violence, no casualties. We'll bring you what you need, and you'll release the hostages without any tricks. Gresh raised an eyebrow, impressed. You're negotiating terms with me, Captain? I like that. Boldness is rare these days. He gave a curt nod. Very well. Ensure the convoy arrives unscathed, and we'll consider this settled. Alara nodded, allowing herself a glimmer of relief, though she knew this would be the beginning of a much larger challenge. Then we have a deal. As she and her team exited, the tension began to ease, but only slightly. Once outside, she gathered her crew, their faces tense with the weight of the mission ahead. So we're actually escorting a convoy to a rogue faction? Reza whispered, incredulity edging his voice. We're making sure those hostages go home safely, Reza, Alara replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. Whatever it takes. Merrick nodded thoughtfully. Captain, we'll have to be careful how we frame this when we report back to the Council. They'll want to know why we cooperated with Gresh. Let's get through the mission first, Alara said, her voice firm. One step at a time. With a final look at the rogue camp behind them, she led her team back to the shuttle. This mission was supposed to be a demonstration of humanity's worth. Now it was becoming something far more dangerous, a test of trust, strategy, and sacrifice. As the shuttle lifted off, Alara steeled herself, knowing that every choice they made from this point forward could be their last. Chapter 4. The Final Test. The journey back to the convoy's staging point was tense, the weight of the deal with Gresh settling over Captain Alara Cade and her crew. Her mind spun with strategies, each one more dangerous than the last. The convoy lay in a remote sector, far enough from Federation oversight that Gresh had been able to track it unnoticed. Escorting it into the hands of a rogue faction felt like crossing an ethical line, but Alara had made a promise she intended to keep, for the hostages' sake. Captain, Ensign Reza said, breaking the silence as he piloted the shuttle through the cold stretch of space. What if Gresh double-crosses us? We're giving him what he wants without any guarantee he'll follow through. Alara met his gaze, resolute. If he betrays us, we'll adapt. But our first objective is to get those civilians out alive. Dr. Merrick Vaughn, seated behind her, spoke up, his usual analytical tone carrying a note of concern. Gresh respects strength and loyalty, but only as tools. We're gambling he won't discard us once he gets his prize. If he's as unpredictable as his reputation suggests, we need contingency plans. Alara nodded. That's why we're not giving him a convoy. We're giving him a decoy. Reza blinked, a slow grin spreading across his face. You're saying we're sending a hollow ship? Exactly, she replied, pulling up a tactical schematic on the console. We'll rig the transport's cargo holds with surveillance drones. Enough to make it look legitimate, but no critical supplies. Once Gresh sends word he's released the hostages, we'll secure them before he realizes the convoy is empty. Merrick's eyebrows rose, impressed. It's a clever play, Captain. Risky, but it might just buy us enough time. They maneuvered the shuttle into the convoy's orbit, where Alara quickly set about coordinating the operation with a skeleton crew. Within hours, they had the convoy outfitted with drones, which emitted subtle heat signatures to mimic an active cargo hold. Now, It was only a matter of executing the plan before Gresh detected the deception. Convoy en route, Captain, Reza reported as they returned to the shuttle. Let's hope Gresh takes the bait. The minutes crawled by as they awaited Gresh's response. Finally, his image flickered onto their screen. He looked smug, leaning back as if he had already won. Captain Cade, he drawled, I see you've honored your end of the bargain. The convoy is en route as promised. Release the hostages, Gresh, Alara replied, keeping her tone neutral but firm. That was the deal. He chuckled, glancing off-screen. Patience, Captain. I'll give the order once my men confirm the convoy's contents. Alara's stomach clenched, but she maintained her composure. She had expected Gresh to scrutinize the convoy, but she hoped their ruse would be convincing enough to delay his realization. We trusted you, Gresh, she said, leaning into the transmission. Don't make this mistake. The Federation will learn of your actions if you cross us. He smirked. Oh, I wouldn't dream of double-crossing you, Captain. I respect a fellow strategist, but trust is conditional. The screen cut off abruptly. Alara clenched her jaw, suppressing the flare of anxiety that rose within her. Every second they waited was another chance for him to uncover their deception. We need to act fast, she said to her crew. Reza, bring us to the hostages' coordinates. Merrick, prep the medkits and containment fields. We're getting those civilians out now. They launched toward the road camp, hoping their window of time would hold. When they reached the landing zone, Alara's team exited swiftly, moving through the complex with disciplined precision. The area was surprisingly quiet, save for the echo of their footsteps. They entered the main building, where the hostages sat bound, guarded by a small group of soldiers who looked as if they'd rather be anywhere else. Alara motioned for silence, her crew spreading out to disarm the guards with tactical speed. Within minutes, they had the hostages free, guiding them out of the camp with quiet urgency. As they neared the shuttle, a distant alarm blared, echoing through the camp. Merrick cursed under his breath. They found out. Reza moved to cover the rear. We're close, but they'll be on us any minute. The shuttle's ramp lowered, and they quickly ushered the civilians inside, securing them in the cargo bay. Alara ran the final check, confirming everyone was aboard before slamming the hatch shut. Go, Reza, she shouted as they strapped in. The shuttle roared to life, lifting off with an intense burst of speed just as Gresh's soldiers swarmed the landing site, firing at the departing craft. The shuttle shuddered under the impact of the stray shots, but Reza's skilled piloting kept them steady as they shot through the atmosphere and out into open space. A warning flashed on the console. Gresh's fighters were closing in, determined to prevent their escape. Alara gripped the armrests, her voice steady. Reza, take evasive maneuvers. Merrick, prep the countermeasures. As the first of Gresh's ships came into range, Merrick launched a volley of decoy drones that scattered through the stars, emitting signatures to draw the pursuers off course. Reza spun the shuttle through a series of sharp turns, navigating through an asteroid field to shake the remaining fighters. They're breaking off, Reza reported, relief evident in his voice. Looks like the decoys worked. Alara exhaled, glancing back at the hostages, who were visibly shaken but unharmed. Let's get them back to Federation space. The tension in the cabin finally began to dissipate as they left Gresh's territory. Alara looked to her crew, pride evident in her eyes. Job well done, team. Today, we didn't just complete a mission. We showed the Federation, and Gresh, that humanity doesn't back down. Merrick nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. We'll have to face the Council's questions, but I think they'll see the value in our actions. Reza leaned back, chuckling softly. Think Gresh will ever trust another Federation ship again? Alara smiled, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. He won't underestimate us twice. That's for sure. As the shuttle sped back to the safety of Federation space, Alara let herself relax. The familiar hum of the engines a reminder of the resilience and adaptability of her team. The mission had tested them in every way, but they had proven their worth, both to the Federation and to themselves. The stars stretched out before them, a vast expanse filled with new challenges and unknowns. But for now, as they sailed homeward, Elara felt a surge of pride in humanity's place among the stars, knowing that, together, they could face whatever came next.